Hello everyone and welcome back. I'm very excited because we're going to be diving into one of my favorite movies of all time, The Shining, because I have finally read the book. So I want to talk a little bit about comparing the two, some conspiracy theories behind the movie, and also overall what I enjoyed more or less about the book versus the movie. Apologies for the strange lighting that's making it look like I have weird beads on my shirt, but there's just no way around it right now. Of course, this video is going to be chock full of spoilers for the book and the movie, but at this point, if you don't know the basic plot of The Shining, I don't know what you're doing on a YouTube channel that focuses on horror book and movie reviews. I will also say there are countless documentaries, blog posts talking about all the theories behind the movie especially, so if you're an avid The Shining fan, I'm gonna guess this video is not gonna be anything brand new to you, but a lot of this was news to me, so I thought a lot of you guys might be curious as well. Before I get into it, I just want to say I don't know how this thought hadn't crossed my mind until about a month ago, but I googled The Shining carpet and it is my goal to have that carpet right here very soon. So first, let's go ahead and get into the book review. So for me, The Shining is one of my favorite films of all time, although I don't think I've seen it in maybe 10 years. I'm just not a big movie rewatcher. So I went into reading the book being very familiar with the plot, and it was a very fun experience to spot all of the strange, well, not necessarily strange, but all of the differences, big and small. If you don't know, the book The Shining is inspired by King's stay at the Stanley Hotel. Not surprisingly, it's a goal of mine to go stay at it. It's one of my favorite horror novel tropes are when just a very tiny amount of people are trapped in a confined location. I read 12 Nights at Rotterhouse recently and really enjoyed that, and there's something oddly cozy and comforting but simultaneously terrifying about that type of setting. So I adored this book, and I know a lot of people say that it's a little bit too slow and it takes a while for things to get going, but I didn't really feel that way at all. It didn't even feel like much of a slow burn for me. I thought, yes, it's on the longer side, but there are a lot of truly terrifying moments that happen throughout the book, even though it does take a while to build up to Jack actually, losing it. One thing I was incredibly surprised about, and I won't talk too much about this now because I'm going to wait a little bit more to when I'm comparing the book to the movie, was how much more I cared for Danny and Jack especially in this book, because I don't find either of them particularly sympathetic in the movie, but I cared about them so much. And one of the main reasons I was so creeped out reading the book was because I was so fearful of something happening to them, and I really wanted all three characters and Halloran especially to survive by the end. Overall, it really lived up to my expectations and actually surpassed them in a lot of ways. Last night, I also rented The Shining on YouTube. You can rent it for, I think, $3.99. It's crazy you can't just watch it anywhere for free. But anyway, I watched it last night in preparation for this video, and again, I hadn't seen it for years, but even just the first few minutes of the film, as the music is swelling, Jack is driving to the overlook, my heart started racing, I started getting really excited, and there is something incredibly special and unique about this film. I mean, that's stating the obvious, because I mean, I'm an avid fan, but I'm, not even remotely in the same league as some people who are so, obsessed with diving into every single little tiny aspect of this film. There are also so many conspiracy theories. There's one called Room 237, and a lot of people think when Danny stands up and he's wearing his sweater that is sort of Kubrick admitting that he helped film and fake the moon landing. That's one big theory that I don't believe remotely, but I think it's fun to think about. It also talks a lot about how the internal structure of the film, like for example when Jack's going in for his interview, it doesn't make sense that there is a window there. And there are all of these tiny moments like that although they're not scary and you might not even overtly recognize them upon your first watching of the film, they stick with you a little bit unconsciously and make you uncomfortable. One thing you might not pick up on your first viewing is that Jack is reading, what is it, Playboy, I think, right before he goes into his interview. And again, it's all those tiny moments combined with just the outright terror and kind of more stereotypical horror elements that I think lend it to being such a classic. There is also some controversy behind the movie, especially with Kubrick and Shelley Duvall's character, well, not character, Shelley Duvall, the actress who played Wendy. It's said that Kubrick and Nicholson had a good relationship and Kubrick treated Jack Nicholson very well, but to say the least, he did not treat Duvall very well, and unfortunately he created this very hostile environment, some say, and I think he's even said intentionally, so that she could feel insecure for the incredibly lengthy amount of time it took to film this film. I think they were on set for, I think, over a year, if I'm remembering correctly, and that entire time he made her feel isolated and insecure to bring that out in her character, which say, hey, it worked, you know, her performance is so iconic. I think the point of an actor is that the director shouldn't need to do that, and so the director should, you know, trust that the actors are going to be able to do that on their own and not feel the need to do that. It's even said, and I'm looking down at my notes here, that he told the crew members, because he let his daughter, what was her name? Her name was Vivian. She created the documentary The Making of The Shining, and in that, and I think there are even some clips on YouTube if you just want to go Google it, where he is telling the crew, don't sympathize with Shelley. That famous baseball bat scene is actually in the Guinness Book of World Records because he made her film it 127 times, which I think sounds like a lot, but especially when you take into account that this wasn't just 127 times of her running away or her acting scared. It was 127 times that included dialogue, so I cannot even imagine. He was just really known for being this relentless perfectionist. Okay, so now getting into the book versus the movie, which is mainly what I wanted to talk about here. But before I get into my thoughts, I think it's important to talk a little bit about the animosity. Maybe that's not the right word, but the differences of opinion between King and Kubrick. Some of this may just be rumors, who knows if any of this actually happened, but from what I've read, King had actually written a screenplay for The Shining and Kubrick just didn't even open it or glance at it because he didn't think it was worth his time to even look at, because he viewed King as a pretty weak, that's the word that I heard he used, writer. And King is famously quoted as saying that he thinks the movie The Shining is a beautiful film and looks terrific. And as I've said before, The Shining is like a big, beautiful Cadillac, but with no engine inside of it. And what King has always said is that he thinks that Jack Nicholson is a fantastic actor, but it's his casting and characterization of Jack that really didn't sit well with King. And this is getting into the definitely biggest difference between the book and the movie. In the book, Jack's descent into madness is very gradual. It really focuses a lot more than the movie on his alcohol addiction, and you really feel horribly for this man that you know loves Danny and Wendy so dearly, but is slowly being consumed by the hotel. Whereas King has said that Jack Nicholson, you know, he had just come off of, you know, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, and it's so obvious within the first like 2 seconds of him being on film that he is just making these crazy faces, very bizarre. So there's no arc between Jack really at the beginning of the film and the end of the film. He's just going from kind of weird and crazy to really weird and crazy. And I'm gonna admit that before I read the book, again, and I still am such a big fan of the movie, I kind of assumed that King was being overly sensitive and maybe the way some writers can be, and just felt that any change to his, you know, work was gonna upset him. And so I really was siding on more of the side of Kubrick and thinking, what is he even talking about? This film is so perfect and so iconic. But my views have completely switched now that I've read the book. Like I said, after reading the book and such a focus of it being on the amazing, well, I shouldn't say amazing relationship, because, you know, he does hurt his arm in the book just like he does in the movie, but you see how deeply he cares for his family, which makes, you know, the ending of the book when he dies that much more tragic. Whereas in the film, and this feels so, I don't feel bad saying it, but it feels odd saying it, because Jack Nicholson, you know, you can't think about The Shining, the movie, without thinking about Jack Nicholson. And after having read the book, I have to say, and as, you know, weird as it feels to say this, Jack Nicholson was easily my least favorite part of the movie. Anytime he was on screen, it took me out of the movie, just because, to me at least, he's a wonderful actor. Obviously, I'm not saying anything bad there, but it felt His acting felt so over the top and so cheesy, whereas Wendy and Danny felt so much more realistic, and I empathized so much with Wendy in the movie, just like I did in the book, even though she has a bit more backstory in the book. But I really never felt any connection between Jack Nicholson and Danny, and definitely zero connection or romance between Jack and Wendy in the film. It feels like, to me, they've never even met before, let alone that they're a couple with a child. Now again, that's not to say that the book is better than the movie by any means. The aspect that I was the most surprised that isn't in the book are the twins. I mean, they're mentioned in the book as daughters that are killed, but you know, there's certainly no instance of him riding on his tricycle and turning a corner and seeing them. The hedge maze is also not in the book, which I was surprised by. Instead, it's hedge animals, which are these topiaries that kind of come to life and attack people, which sounds cheesy, and I honestly think it was really cheesy in the book. It was one of my least favorite parts of the book, and I kind of wanted to fast forward. So I think it's smart Kubrick made that decision. Special effects for like topiaries that are animals chasing, I'm sure would have been hard back then anyway. It was also interesting to see that Jack never is swinging an axe. Instead, what is it? It's like a roque mallet. I think that's what you use when you're playing croquet. And it makes sense for the book because Wendy and Halloran get the beat out of them, and Wendy's never really like physically attacked in the movie because it's an axe, and if he hit her once, she would be dead. So it makes sense that it's a roque mallet, so Halloran and Wendy can be attacked and bleeding and have bones broken but still survive. So those are all of my thoughts on The Shining book versus the movie. Let me know, have you seen or read both, and what did you think about the differences? What do you think about Kubrick's treatment of Duvall? Do you agree with King's thought on the movie? I will say I have not seen Dr. Sleep yet, but I'm really excited to see that because I think it's the same director as the Haunting of Hill House series, which I really love. So again, those are my thoughts. Let me know what you guys think, and I'll see you all in my next video. Bye.